This is the story of a little girl named Ivy. She was not little in years, but little in stature. She stood about 4 inches tall, almost 4 1/4 if she stood on the very tips of her toes. Now, Ivy was a very curious girl, and a collector of sorts. She was a seeker of special somethings, extraordinary objects of beauty and glamour, magic and allure. She was determined to curate the most fantastical collection. In fact, she had lovingly built shelves along all of the walls of her home for just this purpose. She spent her days wandering through the forest in search of special somethings, but the only somethings that caught her eye were perfectly ordinary. A broken bit of ordinary rock, a withered petal of an ordinary flower, a scrap of old, discarded, ordinary rubbish. Ordinary things unfit for an extraordinary collection. Ivy was determined to search for something more. Ivy's story began back in 2024, which was a weird year for me. I spent a good portion of it struggling with my creativity and genuinely feeling like it was maybe time to just let it go. Now, I don't think I ever really could let creativity go, but when you hit rock bottom, the only thing left to feel is empty. If you've been around my channel for a little bit, you might remember my 30 days of art challenge, where I made one piece of art every day for a month. It was this epic journey of healing my relationship with my art, learning lifelong lessons, rediscovering the why of creating, yada yada yada. If you want to hear that story, you can go watch those videos. I'll leave a playlist down below. So during the second week of that journey, I made this piece, and thus Ivy was born. Please don't ask me to explain why I couldn't get the idea of a little girl wearing a bird skull out of my head.
Who knows where thoughts come from? They just appear.
But for whatever reason, I knew I had to draw her, specifically with a dip pen. Now, even though this challenge was supposed to be all about me reconnecting with my art and exploring the wonderful world that is creativity, I was afraid. I was afraid of sharing this piece because it doesn't fully fit the vibes of my usual artwork. It swings more to the curiosity side rather than the cozy side. But to my greatest surprise, this actually became one of my most popular pieces. Apparently there are other weirdos out there like me who go,
girl wearing a bird skull. Nice.
And if that's you, I do have stickers and prints available of that piece up in my shop, as well as a ton of other prints, originals, stickers, and courses. Ivy makes a very cute little sketchbook decoration. But even though I loved the piece, and apparently y'all did too, I really didn't think it would go much farther than that. It would be a one-off illustration, and I'd get right back to my quote-unquote usual artwork. But life doesn't often go the way you think, and my brain said,
move on. Haha, fair maiden, surely you jest.
So when Inktober rolled around, I delved into exploring Ivy and her story a lot deeper. For a whole month, I focused on nothing but Ivy. I made my own list of prompts, and I challenged myself to not only illustrate, but to actually write. Now, for many years, I had myself 100% convinced that narrative writing was not my thing, and that I wasn't even capable of it. But I wanted to call that mindset into question and see if it was actually true. Could I write just a few sentences for each illustration and make somewhat of a story? So when the end of the month came around, I did not have a few sentences for each illustration. I had many, many sentences and a whole freaking book. And to my mom watching this video going,
I told you you're a writer. You do have stories to tell.
I know, you were right and I was wrong. That's not an unusual occurrence. All sass aside, I love you, Mom, and thank you for your encouragement, even when I don't want to listen. But anyways, Ivy's story unfolded into something far more expansive than I thought was possible. It was this story of searching and discovering, this story of love and loss. We started out the story with finding the bird skull and ended with something much more meaningful than I intended for this 1 month writing and illustrating challenge to be. So October 2024 was a big month for me. I completed Inktober for the first time, I greatly improved my ink drawing skills, and I wrote a story. But once again, I was about to let myself be limited by my own dumb brain. I shared the story and illustrations with my patrons and was pretty sure I wasn't going to take it any farther than that. Ivy's story would be tucked away in my sketchbook and a Word document, never to touch anybody else. By the way, if you want to see projects like Inktober or snippets of my sketchbook or my current 100 Heads challenge, I'm always posting over on Patreon. It's basically my Instagram now. And don't worry, even the free tier gets to see all of that stuff too. Anywho, fast forward to 2025. Now I set a very lofty goal for myself. One that I've always dreamed of and really just did not at all believe I'd probably ever do. Making my own art book. After 70 or 80 Mondays of sketching bits and bobbles, just living their cozy little lives, I decided to put them in an art book along with some little poems, story snippets, thought prompts, the works. It was a very big project, and I was absolutely terrified of formatting it myself. Y'all know, technology and I don't get along super great. But although I have an aversion to doing techie things, I also have an aversion to spending money. And I was not about to shell out hundreds of dollars for someone else to do what I could, in theory, learn to do myself. And I did. The Adventures of Bits and Bobbles became a living, breathing, put it on your shelf book. It was tedious, but it was not impossible. Which got me thinking, what about Ivy? If I had successfully formatted and published an art book, could I do the same for a storybook? And if Bits and Bobbles' story deserves to be shared, doesn't Ivy's? So with much excitement and a little bit of nail biting, I'm working on turning Ivy's story into a book as well. I'm currently exploring some different printing options to be able to print the book in its intended square format and Sienna color scheme, while also still being affordable for me as a self-published author. Printing books? It's not cheap, y'all. My tentative plan is to release the book in its anniversary month, October 2025. So what does that look like? What needs to be done in the meantime to actually make that happen? First of all, the story, it needs a little bit of tweaking. So I had my list of prompts, but they weren't in any particular order. Every day, I'd spin this little randomizer wheel, and ta-da, there was my prompt for the day. For example, midway through the story, I got the prompt of moths. So I had to navigate.
Okay, how do I incorporate this into the story without it seeming completely out of place?
All this to say, I didn't really know where the story was going when I began it, so there's a few plot holes and pacing problems. It needs to undergo some editing. What we have now is the bare bones structure, but not all of those bones are where they need to be. But what else needs to be done? So I have a few of the illustrations that I need to redo. When I started Inktober, I had both my dip pen and ink, as well as some multiliner pens and alcohol markers. On the days that I had zero time, I would use the multiliners and markers. I didn't have to worry about drying time or being at my desk. If the only time I had was a few minutes after supper sitting on the couch to do my Inktober piece, these were the right supplies. So there's nothing wrong with these illustrations, but they don't really match the style of all the other illustrations. So I have, I think, 2 or 3 that need to be redone with my dip pen. I also need to digitally tweak a couple of illustrations where I drew this little woolly worm character absolutely monstrous. I mean, if that's a bird skull, even a baby bird skull, then that's a huge woolly worm. But that's a pretty quick digital fix. I just need to scale them down a little bit. So on top of redoing some of the illustrations, there are also a few new illustrations I want to add to the book. When I started writing the story, I was only writing a few sentences for each drawing, maybe a couple of paragraphs. But as the story progressed and I started to find my footing with writing, it got quite a bit lengthier. Page after page to go with one illustration. And the last illustration fit the prompt, but it's not actually the closing scene of the story. And without giving any spoilers, the closing scene is kind of a big moment and probably needs a picture. So to break up some of the text and show more of the story, I need to create a few more drawings. Thankfully, most of these ink illustrations really didn't take me that long to create. For example, the illustration you're watching now took about 1 hour and 20 minutes from sketch to final touches. So I have 3 pieces to redo in ink and probably 12 or 13 to fill in some of the gaps, so about 15 pieces in total, give or take. Which, don't get me wrong, that's quite a few, but like I said, they aren't massive undertakings. Each one is a partial morning of work. I can be making progress on this while I'm still making YouTube videos and writing curriculum and whatnot. And then I have to turn all those illustrations into digital files and format the book, which is a lengthy process. I am much more confident about formatting this one now that I have one under my belt already, but it's not the most fun task to undertake. But while publishing a book does require filling it with all the necessary elements like a story and illustrations and all that jazz, it goes beyond that. There's also
marketing.
I find the psychology behind marketing very fascinating, but I don't love the process of marketing itself. It's not something that I really think about, which is a problem as I am a business and marketing matters. I will say, after going through Kelsey Rodriguez's Entrepreneur's Workbook, I do feel, 1, less cringy about marketing, 2, like I have a better system for marketing and different techniques to implement marketing more naturally into things like YouTube videos and newsletters. And 3, like I understand more of how marketing actually works. So for example, with a project like putting out a book, you don't just go,
"Hey, I made this thing, go buy it now."
I mean, you could, but people have no prior knowledge of or interest in the book. They don't even know what it's about, let alone why you made it, how you made it, or why they'd want it. And that's why I'm jumping in now, months ahead of my hoped-for release date. This is a project I'm really passionate about, and I think it's a story that's going to connect with a lot of people. Is this book for everyone? No, not every story suits every person, and that's why there are loads of different books out there. This one's a story for the wanderers, the ones who see a bit of magic in the mundane, the ones who always seem to be searching for something a little bit more, the ones who maybe find themselves on a different path than what they had in mind and need a bit of a reminder that the most beautiful path isn't always the one that aligns with what you hope for. Anywho, there are many elements to cobble together to bring this book to life, but my hope is to be able to share Ivy and the Special Something with you by the end of 2025. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed chatting with me about Ivy and watching me create this little inky illustration of her. If Ivy's story has piqued your curiosity, then stay tuned because I'm going to be sharing the process of bringing this book to life over the next few months. Huge thank you to the Cozy and Curious Creatives over on Patreon for helping to support my art journey and for encouraging me to share Ivy with others. If you're interested in some more inky art, then head on over to watch this video next. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye guys!